All right, so let's start this broadcast with a big story that we are tracking here on WION. In just the last couple of hours, Russia has struck with what has been dubbed as one of the deadliest attacks on Ukrainian soil in the last several weeks. Now, according to reports that are coming in, 49 people have been killed in this Russian strike. Now, the Russian troops reportedly targeted the Kyiv region, and amongst those who've been killed is also a 6-year-old boy. Now, remember, the Russia-Ukraine war is now in its crucial phase. For the past 2 days, the Ukrainian forces have unleashed wave after wave of drone attacks targeting Russians, which Moscow has termed as the largest one since the conflict began. And according to Kharkiv's governor, a cafe and a shop came under attack in this latest strike by the Russians. Rescue workers at this moment are clambering through the smoldering rubble as bodies lay alongside concrete and metal debris. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is attending a summit with European leaders in Spain, and there he has termed the growing Russian attacks as terror activities. On the battlefield, things are changing pretty rapidly. Now, Ukraine is all set to witness another winter, and Western critics have already voiced their doubts over the Ukrainian counteroffensive as Russian troops continue to prepare their defensive lines for the coming season. Now, remember, Kyiv has not been able to make any major progress or breakthrough from the Russian defense lines in the last 4 months. Ukraine is already short on air power, and experts are predicting that the offensive actions will be affected by the deteriorating weather conditions. Now, for the past few days, Ukraine is reporting an increase in the number of aerial attacks by Russia. Some of it are even aimed at major energy facilities in Ukraine. The Ukrainian military leaders believe that Russia will try to launch another campaign to try and cripple Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Last year, a series of attacks on Ukrainian energy facilities had pushed several Ukrainians into a severe power crisis. Soon, the winter will set in, and this will create a whole host of different problems. Now, according to the Ukrainian General Alexander Tarnovsky, the weather will be a serious obstacle during in advance. However, Ukraine appears to be clinging back to their traditional modus operandi, and that is to move in small groups and try and destroy Russian positions. In this way, they may avoid chance of being struck in a muddy path. Similarly, the Ukrainians are also taking advantage of the Western supplies of longer-range artillery. However, the frontline soldiers say that the war will continue even without the American aid, if that is what it comes down to.
Важкіше, значно важкіше, але не буде іншого вибору, у нас немає попросту. Будемо працювати далі попросту з старою технікою, з тим, що залишилось, і своїми силами будемо виганяти. Це буде затягуватись на більший час, але в кінці кінців буде перемога.
The United Nations reporters claim that the conflict has already resulted in deaths of at least about 10,000 civilians. The report further reveals that between February till July this year, almost 6 people have died and many others have been wounded every single day. The report has also highlighted the ill treatment, the sexual violence and the arbitrary detention by Russian forces against civilians in the occupied areas. The war has also pushed millions of Ukrainians below the poverty line. Ukraine claims that nearly about 26,000 people, including many civilians, are still missing since the Russian invasion. However, reports claim that the correct official number is still hard to guess, as Russian forces occupy almost about a fifth of Ukrainian land, and there's a lack of data on the missing people since the war has broken out. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is, of course, happening in the Russia-Ukraine war at this moment, we're being joined by Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, who is a former German ambassador to NATO and a former European diplomatic and security advisor to the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Mr. Bitterlich, the strike that has been witnessed by the Russians in the last couple of hours is being described as one of the worst in the last several weeks. The question that I want to ask you is, for the last 4 odd months, ever since the Ukrainians were carrying out their counteroffensive, Russia was more happy to sit back and defend its positions. But now, with the weather about to change, is Russia likely to go on an offensive?
Well, it's, first of all, this attack is a typical Russian attack in order to break the willingness of the Ukrainian population to survive and to continue and to fight against the Russians. It's, let's say, psychological action from the Russian side. On the other hand, you are right, the Ukrainian offensive has not come forward as many people have been expecting, perhaps in a certain exaggeration, because the Russians have deepened, hardened their defensive lines on the whole front. Therefore, the whole task of the Ukrainian side has become much more difficult than in the past. Therefore, the Ukrainians attack behind the lines, for example, in Crimea or on Russian soil behind the border. Therefore, the necessity of, let's say, wider ranging arms. And at the same time, what's the importance where the Russians try to break is, let's say, the Ukrainians need more air defense, much more. But please, sir, remind one thing. Some months ago, I remember when we have discussing for how much time this war will last.
Right.
And many people have been saying, well, please wait till the next American elections, till, let's say, end 2024. And therefore, we are not yet at the end of the war. I don't see any Russian readiness to negotiate, nor a Ukrainian one for the moment. And therefore, what will be the right moment for both sides, let's say, for a face-saving action on both sides? For the Ukrainians is consisting in, let's say, leave our territory, and for the Russians it's the surrender of the Ukrainians that they will not get at the end of the day.
I think you've raised a crucial point there when you said that this war could, of course, drag on till the elections in the United States of America that will happen in November next year. But looking at the support that this war has, especially within the American legislatures, the Republicans can't seem to agree on, sending more military aid to Ukraine. And the appetite which perhaps the Americans had for this war in Ukraine is drawing up. With that being the case, do you think the Europeans on their own will be able to back the Ukrainians in this fight against the Russians?
Partly, yes, but only partly. The whole, let's say, the real force is coming from the US, and the Europeans will have, let's say, to speed up and to strengthen their assistance to the Ukrainians by certain assistance, specified assistance, for example, ammunition and other cases, air defense, etc. But they will not be able, let's say, to balance totally the whole assistance coming from the US. No. But I don't think that the Americans will stop it. The Americans, and this is, let's say, the sad infight in the American Congress between Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
It's, let's say, it's not, let's say, an honor, let's call it, for the US.
All right.
In this moment.
Absolutely indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bitlik, for joining us and getting us all those insights there.
A pleasure as always.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.